The links here already?
Yeah, you can post the link, Josanna.
Thank you.
Hello, my friends. We are live. These are one of my favorite conversations to have. International Leftist Coalition Roundtable. This is where we come together. We got a lot of sharp minds here on the table, and we're gonna talk about. Let me turn this audio off. Right now, I want to talk about what's going on in Brazil with Bolsonaro, and this is the perfect opportunity to have Josanna on the show because she knows a lot about what's going on in Brazil. We had her on the first official International Leftist Coalition. We also have Assal Rad, who is returning as well. Super excited to have her perspective. And Karim and Peter is they're almost like the standard guests on this show. So we love their perspective and their expertise. And we're gonna talk about China as well later today. So Cream and Peter, I'm definitely interested in having you guys input on that. But first thing I want to get started off with Bolsonaro, um, the quote unquote right wing populist in Brazil who has an extremely rabid following, and he's in trouble heading into the next election because he's pretty much like the Brazilian Trump in the worst ways. He has a horrific COVID-19 response. He's extremely pro police that was responsible for insane police brutality on the Brazilians. It's just horrific. Um, just a horrific leader. Pretty much the same guys as Donald Trump. But Josanna, I was talking to her earlier, and we was picking her brain about what's going on with Bolsonaro, and the cult like following that he has among the right wing. But there has been a large leftist movement that has been resisting Bolsonaro that I've been following for a while, and what's going on now with the Bolsonaro and their supporters that they're doing demonstrations and there's heavy talks of having a coup and overturning the Supreme Court. And a lot of Bolsonaro supporters, just like MAGA Trump supporters, these people seem serious. I've seen a lot of these people have conversations where they said they're willing to get violent to make sure Bolsonaro stay in power. So, but I actually want to talk to someone who have a lot of knowledge because I'm looking at it outside in. I always trying to learn more about these situations. But I'm very interested. We get started with Josanna, and then we get everyone takes, and we go along and give you guys initial response. But I want to start with Josanna. What's your thoughts? And I want, and you can kind of give an overview. That's probably a better explanation than I had, if you will, about the situation in Brazil and why resisting Bolsonaro is crucial. But go ahead, Josanna.
Hello, everyone. Hi, everyone here too. I was studying, even though I know I didn't want to come here and just be like, "Fuck Bolsonaro," and like just wanted to give a bit more of a context, and then I would say "fuck Bolsonaro." I wanted to say that the reason why I want to make sure people in the world know what's happening, and especially in the U.S., know what's happening. It's because what happens to us in Central and South America is a consequence of the foreign politics in the US, right? And also for the victims of COVID, like my mom that passed away a month ago, and always also for Marielle Franco that was assassinated, and the person of interest is the biggest suspect belongs to this family. I won't say that in a video. To start is like what's happening is like today, September the 7th is the Brazilian Independence Day. It's the day that the Portuguese were tired of just sucking everything out and decided to let us go with the flow and went back to Portugal, and Dom Peter first became the king. So it's an important day, like 4th of July for Americans, and that they decided to do Bolsonaro went on TV, national TV, to ask his supporters to do a protest today, and he has a lot of supporters. And the context for that is like, Steve Bannon. You guys are familiar with him. He was an informal campaign person for Bolsonaro, and he started this campaign chain with fake news through WhatsApp, which is very popular in Brazil. The WhatsApp, the app, and the people were sending like fake news throughout that, like fake articles, and to make sure propaganda to scare people into voting to Bolsonaro. And with that, Bolsonaro wins the election. And so we're going to fast forward for the present moment, and we're going to talk about his positions in the pandemic. So there is a CPI. Mm, it's a commission that's organized in the government with people from the House, Senate, and which could be called the Brazilian FBI, to investigate politicians, because in Brazil we have anti-corruption laws. So whenever you have a suspicion in government, that's what happens. And then in one of the reasons why we are having a COVID CPI right now, investigation right now, is because it was proven from the people that sold the AstraZeneca vaccine to Brazil. They said that Bolsonaro wanted them to put $1 plus in the price of each vaccine. So per person, he wanted to get paid $1 for each vaccine just to put in his pocket. Okay. So that started an investigation. And there was already an investigation that was started about the fake news, that because the movement of the fake news on WhatsApp didn't stop. So they just kept on going because they wanted so they used that to they used the fake news just to spread the word on chloroquine. Please help me with the English if you can, comrades. They use that to spread fake news about the ivermectin, the horse medicine. So the same situation here is there, like people overdosing on these medicines, people drinking bleach, everything that Trump was doing, he was doing too. So there is one guy, his name is Alexandre de Moraes. Not one of my favorites, but he is also against Bolsonaro. It's like Biden against Trump. And he is a judge of the Supreme Court in Brazil. So he launched the investigation about the fake news, and therefore he became the target for Bolsonaro's rage. And that is why people were worried about this protest, the pro-Bolsonaro protest, anti-protest, whatever that circus is, because Bolsonaro has been speaking against the Supreme Court. So people were talking about insurrection, like the 6th of January here in the US. And it didn't happen. It won't happen like that. But there is also another reason why Bolsonaro called this protest today. It's because he wanted to. So in Brazil, the elections are obligatory. So you're obliged to vote as a citizen. The consequences if you don't are not super rigid. You can only you can justify why you're not voting, or you can pay a fine, and it's like $3. It's not but you are obliged. So one person, one vote, everybody in the country, and that's how we count the votes.
That's interesting. So is there a mechanism, whether that be required days off, like mail-in voting, or anything that make it easy for Brazilians or rural Brazilians or working class Brazilians so they can vote? Is there any hiccups they have to deal with there, Josanna?
Yeah. So the day of the election, first and second run, because it's a unit per vote. So sometimes you have a tie and you have to have a second run. So to decide in between two candidates. The day of the voting is off. So it's always going to be a day off, but they always make sure it's on a Sunday also. So, but when it doesn't fall on a Sunday, it's going to be like a national holiday, but it's not a holiday. You have to go vote. And also for the indigenous population in Amazon rainforest, because those count as citizens, they count as citizens. Of course they do. So I will have to look just 1 second because I'll have to look at the translation. Um, it says urn on my Google Translator. We call it electronic urn because before it was an urn, like a box that you would put your ballot in. You didn't cast your ballot through the mail. You have to go and put it in. And they made an electronic urn, right? It's been, I think, more than 10 years that you go in a machine and you cast your ballot, you vote, you know? And that was proven, and I think this idea is coming from China, and that was proven to be the most safe against corruption in election. People go in the machine. It's really hard to like records to change. It's really like protected. It's a very protected system. People go in the machine, they vote, and it's one vote per person. That's how Bolsonaro was elected, right? So right now, because Lula da Silva, for those who don't know, Lula was a president. He had two periods of time that he was president, one after the other, and he used to be a leader for the leftist movement, and since the military government in the 70s, and then he became the president in 2002, and then another run from 2006 to 2010. He was before Dilma.
So Lula
And
was a leftist. That's a leftist leader, isn't it? I
yeah,
was, yeah, I heard that he had pretty left ideas because I know you mentioned that there is some resistance to Bolsonaro, but you're not a fan. So there's like a faction that is more like liberal capitalist minded, while there's a faction like Lulu that is more leftist. Am I correct on that,
yes,
Josanna?
yes. Well, there are a lot of critics about Lula that I could make right now, but I won't because I don't think that's the time period to do that. Because he would never be like Biden, the lesser of two evils. He's actually the good part of it. Like he's the good guy. He's the leftist guy. We use a word to say operário, which is in São Paulo. São Paulo is a big capital. It's a big city like New York, and there are three cities that compose the triangle of the industry. And those people that work in the industry, it's like the coal miner workers. Like they are organized, they have their unions, and they fight for their rights. And they mostly leftist, communist, socialists. And they organize themselves. So you have the parties that they made, the PT, which is the Workers' Party. You have the POC, which is the Operary Party, and then you have the Socialist Party, the Communist Party. They all come from this workers' movement, and Lula is a leader for all of those. Okay, and in the PT, and he was the president. And once for the election against Bolsonaro, he was on purpose arrested, accused of corruption. And now it was proven he didn't commit a crime, so he is free, and now he can be a candidate. And because it was proven that he didn't commit a crime, and he said, I will run just so I can take Bolsonaro away from this. And then Bolsonaro is afraid. He is legit afraid. He declared like he couldn't win Lula, and he can't. And he's looking for ways of staying in power. So that's why press in Brazil talks about coup all the time, because that's the only way that he will be able to be in power, because he will lose the election. So in the democratic way, like democratic and democracy way, he will not stay in power because he will lose the election. So now he wanted to vote to go back to printed ballots. Like he wants people to cast a ballot with their names and sending them, like no, not sending them, go and put the thing. And the proposal he made was defeated in the House. So he's pissed. And he's accusing Alexandre de Moraes, which is the judge. He became a target because the House saw the accusations against him for the fake news, and there is proof. Unfortunately, Alexandre asked to made a proposal to have Bolsonaro impeached, and it was denied by the Senate. But yes, there is an ongoing investigation, and he's at risk. So today, it's the link I private Nick. He made a speech. It's in Portuguese, but it's very short, where he
Is this the
says
first link or second link you want me to open?
the first link. In this speech, he says that he won't get arrested. He says there are only 3 ways he will leave power: through election, through getting arrested or being impeached, and that won't happen. So he's
prison or death or something, right?
Yeah. So he's clearly.
Yeah, I'm gonna get the video pulled up. 1 second, Josanna. Why do anyone else on the panel have anything you want to add or anything you want to add, Josanna, while I pull the video up?
Well, Brazil is right now, it has a number of almost 600,000 deaths by COVID. And also the newest information, we lost 243 million reais or dollars in medicines and support, vitamins and stuff that would go for people with diabetes, because we have a public healthcare system. And that was this was lost, like vaccines and insulin, because they didn't distribute it. His government didn't distribute it. And this is him.
So what we're looking at here, this is footage of the rally that that Bolsonaro was given. I want to see. I think I found a video that has some subtitles that we can quickly watch. I'm not quite sure what he's saying there. Well, let's see. Is there a way we can translate this?
Yeah, I think you can put on the captions.
But I think I can find the video that has some captions on there. Actually, give me 1 second. I think I retweeted it. That's a good video. That's a good video to share. That's a clip that you guys can see kind of the rally support that was shown. Damn, hopefully I can find this video.
This rally was in São Paulo, and I think it was the biggest one. Unfortunately, São Paulo is the liberal capital and liberal far right capital, where also it is the birth of the leftist movement against the military government, but also, unfortunately, is the liberal capital of Brazil. I hate São Paulo. And today or yesterday, he changed this. He made an executive order changing the civil mark of the internet, meaning that companies like Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram cannot remove fake news anymore. Even if it's proven fake, they have to let it be. I mean, it most likely will be defeated by the Supreme Court. Karim, please go ahead.
Oh, I was just thinking, like, I wouldn't think that is too much of a bad idea, considering that Twitter and Facebook usually moderate in a very pro-imperialist, pro-US way. I think, and don't get me wrong, I don't agree with fake news, but I think that everybody should just be able to publish what they want, as long as it's not threatening or threatening people's lives, for example. But I think the moderation on all these platforms like YouTube, algorithms and Twitter and all that stuff, I think that is a huge problem for people like us to actually get our message out. I've just been checking lately a bit to see the dichotomy in viewers on YouTube, you know, for people who are in the leftist spheres like us, and then people who are more on the right side of the spectrum. And you will see on YouTube that, like, people on the right side get hundreds of thousands, millions of views. But when you go to Max Blumenthal or Nick or any other group, even Jimmy Dore, you just get like tens of thousands of views. We don't realize how tiny we are being, we are kept being so small. We don't even realize we're in a tiny, tiny bubble over there. You know what I mean? But this is a bit off topic. Sorry about that. But I do have a question about Brazil, and that is, so a friend of mine, very good friend, is also Brazilian, and he's a colleague over here in Asia, and he actually told me that with Bolsonaro, it's quite interesting that he has actually not only support among white Euro Brazilians, but he also seems to have quite some support among Afro Brazilians. That's what he told me. I don't know if this is correct. And I said, how come? I mean, he's a white supremacist. He's a racist. And he said that, well, the problem is, that's what he told me. So please, your word on this, Josanna. He said that Bolsonaro also is in many ways socially conservative, for example, anti-gay and that kind of stuff. And it seems to be quite popular also among marginalized communities. Is that correct?
Well, first of all, I think it's, yeah, of course, all those informations are true, but I want to say something that I think it's very important to understand. Once you cross the border towards Central America, racism becomes more complex. Because when slavery was being abolished up here in the US, African Americans were going to school. I mean, but they were also like learning how to write and read. Brazil was the last country, the country that took the longest to abolish slavery, and you still can find nowadays, unfortunately, cases of it. So what happens is, what became of the Afro-Brazilian population is like they became the people that live in the favelas. For those who don't understand the concept of favelas, they started as slums. Nowadays, they are full neighborhoods with their own culture. I lived in the favela of Vidigal, which I love. My heart is still there, and I think I will retire there. But like, the favelas started like this, and the majority of the population in the favelas are Black. So what I'm trying to say is, like, once you cross the border and you start going central and south, racism also becomes classicism. Correct me if I'm wrong in the word, please. And
classism, but yeah, that was pretty much on point.
classism. Thank you.
Yeah, pretty much on point.
Classism. And then you have people denying, because I was talking about that in a Twitter room for discussion yesterday, how we had zero representation of Black people in Brazil, and how, like, television, the only way they would portray us was like the housemaid or the slave or the poor person or the gangster. And one wouldn't want to be Black. One would want to hide it. So in order to be accepted in the society. So you have, like, like Pelé marrying all these white women, blonde, blue-eyed women, as a way to, like, make it better in society, like going up in a class, like. And so there is this denial of their own origins and ancestrality, because racism is classism, and people do not. So they support Bolsonaro. The only reason queer people, marginalized communities, Black people support Bolsonaro is for the single liberal reason, because Lula and Dilma, they were talking all the time of implementing the taxation of the rich. And unfortunately, in Brazil, you have this large amount of middle class, and they think they're rich. They're extremely classist, and they think they will be taxed by the government because they truly believe, and if you are watching this for some reason right now, you are not, but they truly believe, sorry to break the bad news, that they are rich, and they are not. And then they would be like, oh, I don't like Lula's government because when I travel, I see my housemaid in the airport. And that's how Bolsonaro, the minister, like the minister for the economy, says, like, why do you think housemaids should go to Disneyland, should travel to Disneyland? Why do they have to have this economy power? So it's classist. It's really based on slavery, on, like, the relationship of who is big and who is not. So in the beginning, when Bolsonaro was just the election time, people, you have many celebrities. I mean, no, celebrities, they are worth nothing, but like you had many celebrities that nowadays are speaking against him. But you had a lot of rich people that were supporting him because of the fact that he would be hard on the poor. And of course, middle class, seduced by that, voted for him. But now they are facing the consequences. Now they are.
There's so many parallels in what I heard from you, and I'll pass it to Kareem. And I want to get Assal and Peter in here very soon, but we, the Black community in America, is stricken by a lot of what you was talking about as well, where there's a lot of social conservatism in the Black community, and that what a lot of people don't really understand. And I know Rome was speaking on this as well, and I have very similar experience. We was raised in socially conservative circles, so those people are much easier to kind of like influence or convince using culture war talking points for the most part. And then whenever I see like Black Trump supporters, I see that they kind of, a lot of them, they kind of want to fit in with their community, where a lot of them, they live like in a white socially conservative community, so they kind of lean that way naturally as well, so they can fit in. But then there are others who they just want to be contrarian. Those we all see them like the Candace Owens style. But yeah, that's a very interesting what you're talking about, like the classism in Brazil, because as far as I know, the income inequality in Brazil is extremely high as well, despite the fact that Brazil has increased their standing in terms of wealth significantly over the last few decades. You're not seeing that trickle down to the working class. Once again, that's a very similar story. And I think this also ties in. We're going to talk about this a little bit later, and I'm very interested to get Kareem and Peter's take on this when we talk about how China reduced poverty. But we're going to touch base on that here very soon. I do want to pass it to Assal and Peter. If you guys have any thoughts or any questions, you guys share it now. Otherwise, I got something else we can add to that. But I'll pass it to you guys.
Also? Okay, well, I had a question. I was interested in how it seemed like the Brazilian economic elite supported Bolsonaro basically as a way of saving them from another like PT candidate, Lula again. But it seems also like over the course of Bolsonaro's presidency, there's been like some elite defections. Like when I heard that Bolsonaro and Global were in a spat, I was like, what? Like that blew my mind. But do you think that's a significant enough development that might actually harm his electoral chances? Or do you think if Lula's running again, the economic elite will say, okay, well, we hate Bolsonaro, but at least he's not Lula? You know, like you had some rich people in the US saying, you know, oh, I hate Trump so much. He's so gosh. And, you know, oh, my God, he offends my norms and blah, blah, blah. But if it were Sanders, well, you know, then I'd really be I'd be torn. So what do you think about the level of economic elite support for Bolsonaro this time and how that might affect his chances?
Well, just to make that clear, like TV Global is, so for those that don't have the context, TV Global is the biggest television company, is the Fox from Brazil. And every single news is going to be Fox News. It's the same thing, it's the Fox. TV Global is against Bolsonaro, but they never did to Bolsonaro, and they have information and means to do what they did to Lula and Dilma. They are like bad actors. Like they are like the witches that like took Dilma out of the government. If you go inside people's house, the majority of the houses every day with lies. They even did something that is illegal in Brazil to put on the news or YouTube, conversation that is recorded between two public employees, right? Two government employees, like the president and the ex-president. Like they put it out. It was a part of an investigation. The judge that was investigating, which is like, oh God, Moro, M-O-R-O, disgusting, man. Like trained by CIA, would always say with a lot of pride, I was trained by the CIA. CIA. He
admitted it?
He never even, like, he was so proud.
Like, well, you admitted it? He actually admitted?
Yeah.
That reminded me of that funny picture.
Yeah.
It was from a TV show. Like, wow, he actually admitted, and that's what that guy just did. Like, bro, you just admit that you were trained by the CIA. That's insane. That's
Yeah,
crazy.
because unfortunately in the Bolsonaro's Brazil, in the hypocrite Brazil, the middle class Brazil, the rich Brazil, it's cute to be a bootlicking, kissing ass of the empire. And like everything that comes from the US is like, whoa, so cool. So he was like, I was trained by the CIA. So he gave this information to TV Globo, and TV Globo spreaded the conversation between Lula and Dilma, which was nothing bad. But like they made it look like it was. They edited it. So TV Globo is never doing that to Bolsonaro, but they are fighting. They are not for him. They are not pro Bolsonaro. You can show it, Nick. I can.
Sorry, I was just being silly, but this is my reaction when you said that he's like, he just admits that he part of the CIA. Like, I'm like, bro, well, that's not a good thing. But sorry, that was my initial reaction. But go ahead, Josanna.
He was very proud. But like it's ridiculous. But like TV Globo is fighting fighting Bolsonaro because he cut the money that they used to get from the government. Reason why, and yes, Peter, you were right. There is like a lack of support, and he's threatening in the next election because the rich people will not rich. The rich people will not anymore say, I will vote for Bolsonaro because at least he's not Lula, because they are seeing the consequences for the country's economy. The country is broke again. We were once the fifth economy of the world. Now we're like sinking down and losing all the royalties from the petroleum to the US. Don't need to make a war against us.
This here from the Guardian article, and I wanted to cover this a little bit, but this also discusses what you guys are talking about. Polls, however, suggest Bolsonaro stands little chance of winning a second term in 2022. This is what Josanna was referring to. And the reason why is because he outraged majority of Brazilians with his radical discourse and chaotic anti-scientific response to COVID. And once again, my sincere condolences to Josanna. Because I think you said you lost your mom because of COVID, but they had one of the worst responses in the world, just like the United States did. 580,000 citizens died because of Bolsonaro anti-science nonsense. And I remember seeing footage of him like openly shaking hands with people after he was sick to kind of show people that like, oh, COVID-19 not a big deal. We shouldn't be socially distancing. Like he was doing what Trump was doing, but he ramped it up to like 100. like Trump was at least showing at least some. He would at least say some things. Like he was like, oh yeah, I think we should wear masks, kind of. But then sometimes like he was kind of really inconsistent on this. But Bolsonaro went all in on the anti-COVID culture war, where he said he's like, this is not a real problem. This is a hoax. And once again, Trump was really bad. But Trump, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think he was that like open about it. Like he did a lot of nonsense to appease the right. But Bolsonaro was straight up hardcore anti-science regarding COVID, and that refers to Peter's what he was asking about his standing, and that's pretty much what and there are a lot of leftist politicians that was asked and quoted in that same article. They're saying the reason why Bolsonaro is doing this demonstration and trying to rile up extremist support because they know they're going to lose in the next election because he had a horrible performance the same way Donald Trump. You can have a right-wing populist message all you want, but at the end of the day, the kitchen table issues is what matter. And he still won over a large percentage of the Brazilians engaging in cultural war nonsense, just like Donald Trump. But then the majority of people who don't buy into that nonsense going to turn against you. And I have this as well. And this is why people was worried, because what Bolsonaro is doing is purposely radicalizing his constituency, so they will be ready to overthrow the Supreme Court at all costs. And this is like the extreme right, militarized groups that are starting to back Bolsonaro. And I bring this up in particular as a martial artist because I am deeply, deeply disappointed. I trained Gracie Jiu-Jitsu for a very long time. I wasn't trained by any of the direct heirs to the Gracies. I trained with Ninja out of Kansas City. He knew Hickson and a lot of those Brazilians as well. But this is Royce Gracie.
Royce Gracie, oh my God, it's a legend, man.
Yeah, and the Gracies are apparently, and this is something I've been learning about recently. Apparently, the Gracies are hardcore, like right-wing Bolsonaro supporters, and that deeply disappoints me. I guess I'm gonna have to watch the fight between Royce Gracie and Sakuraba a few times. I gotta watch Royce Gracie get smashed by Matt Hughes, but he's a conservative too. But this is very disheartening as a leftist martial artist. We do exist, guys, and these people make us look really bad. I don't think I was even. Damn, I think I messed up. I don't think I was even sharing the screen, but there was a screen I thought I was sharing for like last minute. But I think you guys will see it now. But this is Royce. They are very loyal supporters of the president. The fight had just begun. President, you see. But anyway, once again, this is kind of my own ranting as a martial artist. Deeply disappointed because leftist martial arts is this. Like capoeira have roots in revolution. I'm a big fan of capoeira, and this is why I always had interest in Brazil, because I love capoeira. I trained jiu-jitsu for 10 years, and capoeira have roots in slave revolting and revolution. So, I gotta do like a whole stream on this eventually, talking about the leftist martial arts and their influence. But right-wing martial arts, especially with the UFC and Dana White being a scumbag, is so prevalent now. So it hurts to see the Gracies like jumping on the right-wing bandwagon. But that's my whole martial art nerd going on. I'll pass it to Assal anyway. You guys have anything you want to add before we move on?
One of the things that I just thought was interesting in listening to, like Nick pointed out, was the parallels, right? There's literally so many parallels. Even right now, what Bolsonaro is doing, undermining the elections before the elections even take place, setting it up weeks ahead of time so that he basically has an excuse when he does lose the election. I mean, that's a direct parallel to what we saw happen in the United States. And, you know, if you look at more examples around the world, you'll find plenty of examples of protests over, you know, right before COVID, there were several protests in the world. There was protests in Lebanon, there were protests in Iraq, there were protests in Latin America, there were protests in all these places. And what was happening was the protests were being sparked by very small economic changes, right? Like a metro ticket price going up, or like a tax on WhatsApp. And so you see the parallels, and they're rooted in inequality, right? Like the roots of what we're seeing and why you're seeing so many parallels is because there's mass wealth inequality, and it's a global phenomenon. It's not just in the US, it's not just in Brazil, it's sort of happening everywhere. And, you know, what's interesting about the idea that it becomes, you have these people who want to hold on to their privilege is because they're unaware of the fact that they don't actually have, like, you have privilege based on race, of course, right? There's white privilege in the US, there's that type of privilege, I'm sure, in Brazil. So you have racial privileges, but we lack a sort of sense of worker consciousness, right? This idea that in reality, your class, you share much more if you belong to the same class than you do if you belong to the same race. And that's why they play into these sort of like cultural narratives and the war of cultures and the clash of cultures and all of that, when in reality, it's subduing this consciousness. What's interesting is if you look at polls in the US, like for decades, Americans have said that there's wealth inequality. A country that is uber capitalist, Americans as a population continuously say that there is wealth inequality and that it's a problem, right? So what's interesting though is in the same surveys, Americans are totally unaware of just how bad that wealth inequality is. So when you look at it, when you look at the statistics, when you look at the surveys, Americans know that there's wealth inequality. They think that wealth inequality is wrong, but they don't even know just how bad it is. And so they're not conscious. Josanna, you were talking about this idea of they think they're rich, they're in the middle class, they think they're rich. There's a similar sort of parallel here too, where you don't even realize how sort of bad off you are because you don't realize how much that gap exists between wealth. It's like we can't even wrap our minds around the amount of wealth that is concentrated in the hands of a few. And we talk about the top 1%, that's not the issue. It's the top 0.1%, right? That tiny fraction that has so much wealth that's when we say we can't even wrap our minds around it. So I just thought it was fascinating to listen to those parallels and how we can sort of broach these conversations where we're getting past this idea of privilege and realizing that those privileges are masks for the fact that you're being held down as well, but that's happening through class.
If I can jump in for a moment, I like what Assal said about that whole you cross-class kind of support. These people, and Josanna said these people think they are rich, and that's why in the middle class, and that's why they vote for Bolsonaro. You could see the same, you could link the same idea to the fact that white working class is voting for these rich people instead of like voting for a leftist government that is also good for them, as well as black population or indigenous population. Why? Because they still have this idea of kind of a feeling of privilege that makes them actually vote for their own oppressors. So what I'm trying to say is that Gerald Horne says this very good in his book, that one of the most successful cross-class solidarity was created through white supremacy in his history books. That is, that you have a white upper class that actually gets the lower classes to vote for them out of this idea that whiteness gives them a certain kind of privilege, even though they have more in common with their fellow black Americans and their fellow indigenous Americans who are also working class than with what Assal just said, the top 1%, you know what I mean? So this idea of race, this made up idea of race, is a very powerful tool to get a cross-class solidarity and an international solidarity, because we are visible beings. And I think what Josanna also said about Brazil, and that's why I need to learn more about Brazil. I want to incorporate that into one of my courses at the university, is that this shows us how incredibly important for us it is to start understanding all these large social historical dynamics that bring us where we are. Psychology, for example, the fact that a lot of black people, African Brazilians, want to deny their blackness, what it had done psychologically to these people. You see that everywhere in countries where there has been some form of colonization or European culture, but you also see it in the Philippines, where people try to use bleach on their skin. You see it in Malaysia, you see it in Indonesia, you see it in South Africa, you see it everywhere. That's that psychological part. What is it tied to? Well, it's tied to a sense of inferiority. Where does that inferiority come from? Because you have always been part of a lower class. How did you become part of a lower class? Because you had a wealthy upper class that has all the wealth. Then we get capitalism. Okay, somebody like Bolsonaro is a European. What is a European doing ruling Brazil? We have to ask these questions. And I'm talking about an ethnic European. You know what I mean? So you see that all these things are related. And to make a final point about what Josanna just said, she said something very interesting, that during Lula, Brazil was becoming a very, very successful society that raised people out of poverty, that had economic growth. And then you get a Bolsonaro that completely messes it up, destroys the country. And we have the tendency to say, hey, this is a failure. This is something, this guy is a big mistake. This guy is destroying everything. But in fact, you guys got to understand that for the capitalist class, he's doing exactly what is intended. This is a good thing. That is why China is such a problem, because they're pulling people out of poverty. And when you get a working class, and indigenous people and black people being pulled out of poverty en masse in a society, this is a huge, huge threat to the capitalist class, because you get an example of a country that is not, you cannot, how can I say that pulls people out of that exploitative position that is really, really good for capitalism. So then Bolsonaro comes, and he is a success story for these guys at the top in the United States and all these capitalists around the world. Put the people back into place, back into poverty. We have this rich white elite that pulls out all the resources, and Brazil is back in business. The elites are back in business. You know what I mean? So just to really try and tying all these dynamics together, colonialism, capitalism, psychology of racism. I think that is really, really important for us to understand.
Yeah.
I think it's sorry, Nico.
No, go ahead. Go ahead, Josanna.
No,
And
I
then
think
someone
it's
else can jump in after her as well. Go ahead.
yeah, please. I think it's important to see that it's not the way the history is taught is that like everything kind of happened by accident. Like they were on the beach and they saw these different pieces of leaves and oh, let's go there and find out. Oh, they took the wrong route to India. Whoa, it's not. You know, it's very tied up and it's built, the system is built to keep the real minority in power. Because if you see, like, European white people are the minority in numbers. They are. But the system built by them, because they were the Belics, when they were the ones that attacked people, they were the ones that came with guns and stuff over all of us, rest of the world, right? So like that is tied up to keep this minority in power. So I'm not gonna just show you my weaponized power. I'm gonna mess up with your mind, and I'm gonna spread, like, that's the base of the fake news thing that Bolsonaro did in Brazil, Trump did here in the US. Like, you're gonna mess with people's minds and you're gonna be like, but there is more to that, like, and there is not, and this person is doing this and they bad, like the propaganda, like Assal said, like the race, like the 0.1% controlling us, because we don't even know that it's impossible. It's impossible. I affirm it's impossible to be part of their group. Jeff Bezos didn't like work hard on the plantation and became Jeff Bezos. Come on, you know, like it's impossible. But this propaganda, which we call American dream, says to our heads like a mantra, right? Like, it's possible. One day you will be less Black, you will be less Latino, you will be less, I don't know which minority you are, you will be less, and you will be more white if you get closer to us. And you get all kinds of relationship, because that's like Bolsonaro, when he saw Trump, he did this to Trump. The man is the president of a country. He did this thing that I'm not even worried about to say the name in English because I don't want to learn military codes. But he did this to pay respect to another president. So he was so happy to be less, whatever he is, considered minority, because yeah, in the eyes of the US, he's just a, right? Because, and then there is a movie in Brazil called Bacurau, Bacurau. Kleber Mendonça Filho was really like he had a really good clue there, where he shows that these hunters that go to the northeast of Brazil to hunt humans, because we have no value for white supremacists. And then you have this pair of like white passing Brazilians that are like, oh, we are with you guys. And they're like, no, what? I was like, no, we are white. And they're like, they start laughing, like, you are not white. So like he shows with his movie, like, what's the reality? We will never, ever, and I'm talking now to poor white people too in the US, you will never, ever sit on the 0.1% table. You will die because of extreme labor. So your body is just going to stop functioning. That's what's going to happen. You will keep on sponsoring wars and coup d'etats all over the world. And you, most of the time, will starve. Will be drowned in debt, because you will never achieve. You're just going to give them. You're just going to finance their richness, their, you know.
Yeah. So this is why having class consciousness is so important. And what you guys were bringing up it was such a great point when you guys brought up the 0.1%. I know Assal, Karim, and Josanna just referred to that as well. And I was on the Vanguard, and we was having the conversation about Hassan, and I saw Destiny was like criticizing him because he's a millionaire. There's a lot of criticisms that you can have of someone who is more like class loyal and defending politicians all the time. But I don't think attacking people because they're millionaires is one. I was playing this on the Vanguard because you guys got to understand the difference between a millionaire and a billionaire. Like that is a vast sum. And I was pulling this up because I love these examples. I was trying to find the right video that I showed on my show before, but I can't find it. But this from Shower Thoughts. The difference between a millionaire and a billionaire is so vast that 1 million seconds ago was the start of last week. 1 billion seconds ago was 1989. That's the difference between someone who's a millionaire versus a billionaire. So why am I bringing this up? I'm bringing this up because even if you are doing well, if you're of the white suburbanite class, and let's say you have a great career, great investments, you're still a millionaire, you still should be on board with eating the top 0.1%. Period. Because Jeff Bezos and the wealth that these people have, like the Elon Musk, the billionaire capitalists, oil tycoons, the wealth that they have and the wealth that they are extracting from our community is only hurting you. And this is the idea of progressive economics that we as leftists have to explain to people who was convinced to vote against their own interests under the guise of the culture war. And that is exactly what you guys laid out. This is what Bolsonaro is really great at doing. This is what Donald Trump is great at doing. Hell, even the Democratic Party is great at doing this now, where they use the culture war as a way, and this is very prevalent on the right wing, especially in America, where they use the culture war as a way to get poor white people to vote against their interests, like Josanna was mentioning earlier, because they're like, oh, I can be rich, it's not fair that you guys want to eat the rich. Like, bro, even if you're a millionaire, you should want proper allocation of resources, because the wealth that Jeff Bezos has stolen, the surplus value that he's stolen from the Amazon workers, that could be going to your community, that could be going to your business. So let's say even if you are a successful small business owner, right? If we actually had a proper allocation of wealth where the Amazon workers should be making their true value, which I think if you look at how successful and how wealthy Amazon is, you try their workers making $500,000, then people should be millionaires if you had a proper allocation of wealth. Now, those people with that amount of wealth will invest into your community. Those people will pay taxes, pay property taxes. They will go and visit and boost you up. So everyone wins in this system, even if you're doing well. The white suburbanites, even if you're doing well, we will benefit as a society by eating the rich. This is shown in study after study. If you look at how progressive policy will improve society, like the UBI, Medicare for all, these things will actually boost the economy, because it's a basic progressive economic approach that I explained to you guys. Like Medicare for all boosts the economy because you have people not spending a ton of money on healthcare. So this is common sense, and this is such an important point. And I noticed how like the 25 to 30% of Americans. What I mean by these are kind of like the unreachables. Like if you look at the policies of the most popular programs, Medicare for all is supported by 70% of American people, and in the drug war is supported by 80% of American people. Okay, who are these 20%? This 20% of the people I'm talking about right now. These people don't care. These people don't care if Medicare for all saves money. They don't care if we had a wealth tax if you had a wealth tax and you had these business people, they would be less likely to take that wealth home if they know all that money is going to be taxed. So if you have a wealth tax, they will actually trickle that down into their company and to their workers. So this benefits everybody. You explain that to conservatives and some of these people, that 20% I'm talking about, they don't care. They rather pay more. And I think, and this is my personal take, and this kind of ties into Karim. I would love to get your guys' thoughts on this as well. I honestly think this is kind of tied into racism as well. Like I do a lot of class analysis. I also do race analysis. And I think there's a lot of white Southern races that rather pay more for healthcare because they okay with socialism for the rich. Like you don't see none of these rednecks and these Southern people complain about the corporate bailouts and the giant corporate foundations getting a ton of taxpayer money. They don't care about that. They care about any program that may benefit the Black community, that may benefit the Latino community. So they rather not have healthcare if we don't have healthcare. And I've seen this all the time because these same people, they okay with their Social Security. They in Missouri, they may even vote for a Medicare expansion for themselves, but at the end of the day, they don't want anything that will actually impact the communities they deem lesser. Because if they deem you as a lesser, they want you to suffer. So that's that 20 to 25%. And everyone else, like the people that are always trying to flip the independence, you can get them to realize that we can be class conscious by making the difference between that millionaire and billionaire and the destruction that the billionaire class actually had, both in the capitalism in the United States and the wealth inequality in Brazil and across the worldwide. So I want to pass it to you guys. Anyone have anything to add to that? And we're gonna get to China here very quickly, but I'll pass it to the panels.
I think Assal wants to say.
Go ahead, so I'll
Sorry,
pass it
sorry.
to you.
I was just going to say, I'm sort of glad you brought up the Hassan controversy over his house, and the reason is because I think, I said earlier that there's polling in the U.S. that shows that Americans believe that there is an issue, right? Like that wealth inequality is an issue and that wealth should be distributed differently, but they are unaware of just how bad the problem is. Now, and in those polls, when they ask Americans how wealth should be distributed, it's never a straight line, right? So Americans don't have this idea that everyone should have the exact same thing. They do believe in the idea of a certain distribution of wealth. But the problem is the total misperception of what that distribution is. And to your point, when you compare a billionaire and a millionaire, it's like we're not even wrapping our minds around what we mean by wealth. Like Hassan buying a house, not the issue. That's not what's stopping me from getting Medicare or Medicare for all or any of these systems put in place. And the fact that, I think there's something that I wanted to bring up. I think sometimes there's a misperception on the left where the idea is not to fetishize being in poverty. The entire idea is to pull people out of poverty. We don't want people in poverty. We want people to be able to afford a standard of living that everyone has. Create a standard of living where people have healthcare, they have education, they have somewhere to live, they have access to food and medicines. Those are just basic standards of living. Saying that everyone should have that doesn't mean that you can't have some people with a little more wealth or some people with a little less wealth. There is a misperception that we have to go to either extreme in these polls. And what's funny is we don't realize how extreme we are living in the other end. We live in an extreme, and that is wealth inequality. So when we talk about distributing it, it's not about going to the polar opposite extreme, right? It's just about saying we live in a disturbingly unhealthy society and we need to revisit this. And, you give examples from countries that have more hybrid systems, that have social welfare programs, but they're still mostly capitalist. And those are the Scandinavian countries that we always talk about. But what about the US as the example, right? At the turn of the century, when we were going into the 20th century, there was something called the progressive movement. And part of that was because the United States was an oligarchy, right? The government had no control over anything. Companies had control over everything. So what did we do? We said that monopolies are illegal. There was trust busting. I mean, Teddy Roosevelt was known as the trust buster or something like that, something to that effect, because he broke apart these banks. We put, FDR, when you talk about that system, you talk about people with wealth being taxed at massively high rates. That didn't mean that they didn't have any more wealth. But when you have billions of dollars, it doesn't really matter how much we tax you. You're still going to have way more money than everybody else. So the issue, again, is an understanding what is meant when we talk about distributing wealth. It doesn't mean take all of the money away and now go give it to everybody in that sense. It means take our own money, right? This is the most frustrating part of it, is how often not only is there a wealth distribution problem, but there's what the government does with our money. So now you're taking my money, but you refuse to spend it on me. Instead, you're spending it on more nuclear weapons or trillions of dollars of wars that have no positive consequence anywhere in the world, including in the United States. So it's a double issue of how we are taxing people and what we do once we tax people. We have tons of tax revenue that we take from ordinary working class Americans. But asking that money to be used on those same people for some reason draws the ire of the wealthy classes. And that's another problem that we have to be able to discuss.
Yeah, and I just wanted to follow up on a point you brought up at the beginning there about ignorance, essentially, like what people don't know. There's a study from, I think, like 5 years ago that asked people what they thought the level of income inequality was in the US, and what they thought it was more equal than Sweden is now. That's what they thought the reality was. And then they asked them, what would be the ideal distribution? And they picked something that's more equal than any society on earth. So the problem is ignorance. And this actually ties into the entire conversation we've been having, because, you know, I've talked to a working class, I've talked to working class Brazilians, melanated as well, who are Bolsonaro supporters. And we have to remember, like, you know, we saw polling before that last election. It was like, if Lula was running, he would have run away with it. But when he wasn't running, Bolsonaro won. And so that really challenges people, like, I think, like people like us who are political junkies, and we read a lot about politics, and we assume that everyone is on a left-right spectrum and most people are in the middle. And if you support someone on the left, then you're going to pick the next leftmost person. No, that's just not how it works, because our media and education systems leave people horrendously ignorant about politics. So for a lot of people in Brazil, but also a lot of people in the US, a lot of people in India as well, they have a sense that the system is corrupt. And so a candidate like Bolsonaro is attractive because it's like, oh, look, he's a bomb thrower. He's someone that all the people that I hate also hate, like the liberals, the kind of educated elites, like, oh, they hate him, so I'm going to support him. You had a lot of that same dynamic with Trump. You have the exact same thing in India, too. I know a Catholic guy from India here who is basically supportive of Modi. Like, in terms of ideology, you know, you couldn't imagine something more different. But because he hates the Congress party so much, the kind of they're like the Democrats of India, like a center-right neoliberal party essentially now. Because he hates them and their corruption so much, he wants to support the people that they hate, just to shake up the system. So you do have some people that are informed about politics, and they like Trump because, you know, he's going to cut taxes on the rich. They like Bolsonaro because he's going to allow them to cut down the rainforest to build more agribusiness. They like Modi because they actually believe in Hindutva and Hindu supremacy, etc. But you also probably have a much, much larger group of people who are not thinking in these terms. They're simply thinking in the terms of, the system is horribly corrupt. I want something different. I want something to shake up the system. So in a way, that's kind of good news for us, because it means we have fertile soil to spread our ideas, but we can't do it without actually spreading ideas. We can't just assume that everyone is basically as interested about politics and as informed about us. We have to recognize that we have a huge problem of ignorance as a result of our terrible media systems and our deficient education systems. And then we have to go out there and educate people. Without that, we're really not doing anything.
Yeah, that brings us a bit to the central problem I was talking about before, and that is that what you just said, Peter, is that media ecology, you could say. Who was that just now who said it? I think it was Josanna, that people. So when you have, at least that's what I saw in many countries, including my own country, the Netherlands, is that when you see a crazy right-wing pro-capitalist bigot, the media is never, ever as harsh and rejecting as when it is a left-wing candidate. I mean, we had a socialist for the first time in like decades who became very popular in the Netherlands back, some years ago. And this guy, the only thing he wanted was like a revival of unions, helping the working class, poor minorities, and so nothing bad. In fact, a lot of good stuff. And the media just went insane. This guy would destroy our economy in our country and everything. And it worked. It worked. He lost. He just, like, everything went down, you know what I mean? And so I think we increasingly are realizing that our media system is mostly purely a propaganda machine for the elites, for those with power, whether it's in Brazil, whether it's in Europe, whether it's in the United States. And this is so incredibly difficult to beat. Like, we really need to start thinking about what can we do to get our message out. And that includes thinking about how can we build also a kind of leftist media network / empire that finds a way to spread the message outside the mainstream channels, such as YouTube, such as Facebook, and so forth, because that's not going to happen. Like I just said, if I go to Empire Files, if I go to the Gray Zone, if I go to even Jimmy Dore, if I go to Jimmy Dore is what you would call big on the left side, you know what I mean? But they're not allowing him to grow anymore. And still, what Jimmy Dore is, like 866,000 people or 889,000 people, that is for us, it's big, but it's tiny in the ecosphere of YouTube. Seriously, I just accidentally went watching some. I say accidentally, but maybe I just love it. Dog and cat videos on YouTube, and there was this one like channel in Malaysia who films a monkey playing around with dogs and cats and everything, very cute. And seriously, like every single video gets like 15, 25 million views. These guys are multi-millionaires, you know, and the channel has like, I don't know, millions of people. And I'm like, I looked at this and I was like thinking, and then we have the Gray Zone with 155,000 people and 4,000 views or 10,000 views per video. We're nothing in that ecospace. Nobody hears us. We think our message get out because we keep talking to each other, you know what I mean? But nobody hears our freaking message, man. You know? So I really think that this is something we have to start thinking about seriously. Like, how can we get out of this, you know?
I wanted to add to that you all are saying, just by like going back to the propaganda, right? Like, the propaganda in Brazil works in different ways, because we in the South America, we had the military governments that were sponsored by the US and the Cold War time, right? So Cuba was lost for them. So they were like, no, and like millions of people died or disappeared, tortured, and something else. And then like, because of that, I feel like we are more organized because we saw the darkness. We saw the empire acting in our own soil, like our lives were taken. So the leftist movement is very, very organized, to the point that I am part of it. And I was a critic to Lula's government. I helped create the PSOL, which is the party that was most critical of PT back in 2006. But I will campaign for him, and with a light conscience that I know that I'm not campaigning for Biden. I will campaign for him so he can win, right? And I think, and the critic that we had is like, Lula was so radical. What happened to get elected had to be like getting together with the liberals so he could get elected. But that's okay, because like it's not even close to what we're facing in America. And I think the propaganda there works like, and in the time of the military government, they would say Che Guevara ate children's flesh. And you guys have now the QAnon theory in the 21st century. It's a propaganda that's coming from the 70s in the South America. Somebody eating children's flesh so they can get young and strong. But people truly believed, and things like communists would go inside your house and they would take your house away, and those things they rooted. But now what I'm seeing, the tendency for these governments, for the dictators, the fascists, what they are doing, they are using words that we as leftists use. If you see that, if we had found the Bolsonaro's speech with subtitles, you would see that he was saying, this is a dictatorship. We need to fight for freedom. We are being incarcerated. Like, he's using themes that we as leftists use when we are on a protest, demonstrating, or like in a speech. And Trump did too. So right now it's like they are inverting, and they're using what we say to get to people's minds. So the speech is strong, right? The speech that we always have had is strong. but so much so that they are using that now against us, right? Against the majority of people, not calling them leftists, but we are fighting because we see that we have to, because the world is dying and we are not going to make it if we don't. So they are using leftist speech in order to get to where they want. And before we move on to China, I just wanted really to play the second link, Nick.
Yeah, no
because
problem. Let me pull it up.
just from the 3:35 to the 4, it's just so we can all have a laugh at Bolsonaro's expense. Because the day that he wanted the House to vote for going back to the casting ballot written votes, because he talks publicly and he's threatening people in the government while he talks. So he did a military parade to show his power and scare people in the House to vote for his wishes. But if you guys see, look at the military power of Brazil right now, because our taxes don't go there, which is great. And then you can see, like, there are single cars, like cars just in the other side of the street, like people just going to work, a truck, like nobody even care. And then look at the tank.
Even North Korea looks more impressive, to be honest.
Hey, the NYPD and LAPD probably alone.
I think this. Look at this tank coming. Look at the smoke. Oh my god!
First World War tank.
So if you see the comments, people are laughing like, "Who this guy's threatening with all this military power?" Right? Like, he's just
isn't the NYPD like the world's like 6th largest army by like number of officers?
Yeah, if you combine the police spending in America, it'd be the 3rd largest military spending in the world, just the police. Number 3.
Wow.
That's how much we spend on the police. That's why I advocate for defunding the police, and that's the moderate position. A lot of people always want to say North Korea. Oh, North Korea, this totalitarian fascist regime. The NYPD spends 3 times more than North Korea does on their military. Just the NYPD. Just to give you guys some perspectives about who really the authoritarians that you guys are worried about. I'm worried about the cops. I'm not worried about Russians or.
Meanwhile, last week, New York was underwater, and then I the only thing I could think that night is like, what will the robot dog that NYPD has do? Is it gonna come flying and save us all? Like, I just.
They waste so much money. They waste so much.
Police, I get really angry.
Yeah, they waste so much money on that stuff. And I always redirect everything because my struggle is against the U.S. empire. So whenever people want to complain about other countries, I always say it's the U.S. empire that locks up 25% of the world's prison population. Not China, not Venezuela, not Russia. It's the United States. We are the one who gas and brutally beat up protesters, shooting their eyes, making people go blind. We literally sprayed pregnant women with gas that made them it ruined their pregnancy. I'm for lack of a better word. So like the crimes of the United States empire trumps everyone else. And you have people that, and I think this is a good transition. I think you have people that always fearmonger about China. Despite the fact that China has one military base compared to our 800 to 900, and so it's like these kind of things you got to keep in consideration. The fact that they actually did a great job reducing the amount of poverty they have in China, while our life expectancy in our country continue to drop, and this is why you see this shift in focus toward fighting this new Cold War in China. And that's why, as an anti-imperialist, I was very hesitant towards praising Joe Biden, because the Biden administration was very open about the fact that one of the reasons why they want to scale down the war in Iraq, I say scale down because they're still going to have, covert operations. over-the-air operations, which mean they're going to bomb people in Afghanistan. So I don't like using the term end the war because they're not really doing that. But I will use the term scale it down because they are scaling down the war in Afghanistan. And they plan on using this to fight the Cold War in China and Russia. And they was pretty open about this. And one big thing that Tony Blinken was saying was that we need to rethink our overall strategy. And that what Afghanistan was. It wasn't a lesson of the United States drifting towards anti-imperialism. Actually, there's more evidence to the contrary that the United States is doubling down on imperialism and invading other countries. And I want to get Karim thoughts on this because I know I checked out that video that you sent me with because I really want to get Ronnie and Kalik on the show eventually because they were talking about how China did a great job reducing poverty in their Belt and Road initiative. So you guys are out of Hong Kong, and I want to take this opportunity to learn from Karim and Peter on this topic. So I'm gonna pass it to Karim first. I know we checked out the interview they did when they're talking about China reducing poverty and their economic model and the United States response to that. So I want to toss it to you. What's your thoughts? Do you have anything you want to break down regarding the Cold War in China?
So I think what is very important for us to understand is that historically, the countries that have been demonized by the United States or the European empires, former empires, are countries that are usually a threat to capital. Okay, whether it's Soviet Union, Cuba, and in this case China, is that we always need to be, especially as leftists, very wary of the countries that are criticized the most by our governments, and in this case, the United States. China is, whatever you think about the political system or whatever, I think there is not a country that compares to the damage and the destruction that right now comes from the United States and formerly the colonial empires. Okay? So I don't care right now about the Chinese government or the way they are ruling their country. What I care about is that they are taking care of the poor, that they're pulling people out of poverty, they're increasing healthcare, education, and so forth. While in the United States, I see the opposite happening. And I see in Europe, we are slowly getting into that neoliberal trend of complete destruction of the middle class as well. So what China is doing to its own population, in a sense, China is also doing to populations around the world. China has a very different cultural heritage. Thousands of years of cultural heritage, very different from the European and in particular the Northwestern Protestant kind of European culture of pure domination, exploitation, and so forth. This is also what developed the system of capitalism. Predatory capitalism came out of colonialism, expansion, domination, exploitation. And China is doing to the rest of the world a bit what it's doing to itself. It's pulling people out of poverty. It's doing the same in Africa. It's doing the same in Southeast Asia. In fact, and this is the interesting thing about China, that's why we as leftists need to pay attention. China is the first major superpower in the world that supports socialist governments. I mean, this is so extremely important for us to understand. Like, this is a major power in the world that supports socialist governments around the world and that supports anti-imperialist movements. And not only that, it also helps other countries like in Africa, but also in Latin America, to build infrastructure, to build up their country without demanding that you become their system of politics, that you put elites in place that work for China. It's a very different system. So what am I saying here? I'm saying that we as leftists, for the first time, have the chance to have a hegemonic power on our side, you know? And instead that we are going to jump on the boat with the imperialists and people like Vosh, you know, and that we are going to like say that China is imperialist and a danger, and that's why the United States so-called should stay in Afghanistan, which is just disgusting. Instead of doing that, we must see one of the greatest chances we have for the first time in history, that we have a major power that actually supports leftist anti-imperialist movements. And it's also important because it's a country that has suffered under colonialism, century of humiliation, and it's the first real non-white, non-Caucasian contender on the world stage for power. You know what I mean? So I think this is very crucial for us to understand when every time you hear that despicable propaganda, that anti-China propaganda in the media, and a lot of so-called leftists seem to be falling for that. While you live a terrible marginalized position in your own empire, in your own country. United States has 5% of the global population, but 25% of the prison population, of which are most non-whites. So so every time you hear that propaganda from the West, what China is doing to its minorities? No, first look at yourself, okay? Then you can complain about someone else. Nick, yeah?
Yeah, I'm always deeply, and this is kind of how I grew up. I was explained before how I was radicalized during the George W. Bush administration. And I don't know how anyone can see the United States government constantly lie and then have any trust towards them. So whenever I see, this is my mindset now that I learned as I grew and became more informed leftist. Like whenever I see the United States State Department push extreme propaganda against a country, I'm immediately skeptical of that. And this is going on with China. You got a lot of these same people, and like Vaz, as you say, for example, they will always say stuff like, China is an imperialist nation. And I want to get you guys thoughts on this as well. And I love to get Peter and Assal's thought on this, because I was looking into this and I wanted to educate myself, make sure I can speak on this. And looking into this accusation that China is like this imperialist nation is kind of deeply rooted in racism in a way, because whenever the United States and whenever the West invest into a country, whether the people want to do it or not, we are seen as liberators of sorts. This is kind of the Western chauvinism mentality. But you have, I think, like 30 out of the 40 African countries that was accepting help from China. And a lot of these countries, they know what they're doing. They understand the investment. A lot of these countries in Africa, they was victims of imperialism for decades and decades and decades. So I think they are able to recognize whether this deal is worthwhile or not. And then you also have people that was flowing the idea, you have China putting all these countries into debt slavery. Well, for one, them actually helping building infrastructure in other countries is so important for those countries in order to build and advance their revenue. But it also ignores the fact that you had China that was forgiving a ton of debt. They forgave a ton of debt in Ethiopia. So what exactly would be the end game that you would criticize and that you would call imperialism? So I would love to get you guys thoughts on it, because I gave this a lot of thought, and I wanted to make sure that I'm being as fair as possible. I just feel like calling China an imperialist country because the Belt and Road Initiative that is 100% helping third world countries and not putting them in debt. I think that just kind of, if you say that, you just rob the word imperialism of all its meaning. You have imperialism is all about domination, all about imposing your culture and stealing resources, and what I see what China doing. And a lot of these developing countries, I like to say, I hated the term third world country. Like I'm not calling a country a third world country if they offer healthcare and we don't, for example. So let's use the term developing country. I see nothing but positives for them right now. You just have a lot of people in the West that just want to fearmonger, even though U.S. imperialism, we implement sanctions on countries that starve their population. So it's like, how can we trying to pretend that what China is doing is anywhere close to the imperialism we are? But obviously, I still got a lot of growth on this issue, but I try to approach it in a lot of different angles. But I'm very interested, and I want to get Peter in here. I'll start with him. We talked to Assal and Karim. But I do want to bring up the opposing argument. And that's kind of me thinking it out to myself. Like, is China imperialist? Is the Belt and Road Initiative a new form of imperialism? I kind of gave my thoughts, but I want to get your guys' thoughts on that as well, Peter.
Yeah, I mean, I think we could start first taking a page out of Jesus's book and not try to pull the mote out of our neighbor's eye when we've got a plank in our own eye. That would be a good start if we were a Christian country, but I think that's pretty obviously we're not. But I think to help people in the West, especially leftists in the West, to understand China, but also other countries that are ruled by a communist party, is to understand, like, for people in the West, what is the thing that drives you to the left? Like, the main problems we face domestically in rich northern, Western core countries are inequality and worker exploitation. So for them, like, the kind of main focus of leftism is ending those problems. But if you're someone drawn to the left, 100 years ago in China or India or all sorts of countries in West Asia, Africa, et cetera, Latin America, you have an additional problem. You've got the empire's boot on your neck. If you try to use your own resources to develop your own country, you're going to get literally murdered by the empire. So that's the reality that people in the global South, the majority of the world, that's the reality that they were facing. So people that were attracted to communism, and basically it was like everyone who is educated, even people who weren't educated but were interested and tried to learn on their own, they were attracted to communism, to communist ideology, to Marxism, because it seemed to them the only way that they could possibly develop and become strong enough that they could get the boot off their neck, so that they could actually develop, so that they could use their own resources and their national wealth for their own people, rather than just give it away to rich people in the West or the North, right? So when you look at it like that, you have to understand, like, the first thing a country in the global South that is under the domination of the empire has to do is to strengthen. You have to get your economy to the point where you can no longer be crushed by sanctions. Right now, most countries in the world, if you're cut off from economic inputs from the global North, from the core countries, you can just be absolutely crushed. You look at North Korea, how difficult the situation is for people there, because they cannot produce everything that you need to produce in order to provide your citizens with the resources that they need. More importantly than that, even if your economy is not capable of producing all of the kind of top of the line, most technologically advanced products in the economy, that also affects your military power, because almost everything, from semiconductors to aerospace, has a military use. And you don't have to think of it in terms of offensive military power. I'm just talking about defensive military power. So if you look at what China's strategy was, after the revolution, they had the Soviet Union to follow. Great example of a poor country that industrialized extremely rapidly, far more rapidly than anyone in the ruling class of the northern countries, the global North countries, thought they would be able to do. And they actually started to get really worried, because they thought that system would be very sclerotic and it wouldn't be able to pull off industrialization. But in fact, it did very successfully, very quickly. So they followed the Soviet model. They had Soviet advisors. They got technology transfer from the Soviet Union to start building factories, power plants, roads, bridges, railway networks, et cetera, et cetera. That was the basic thing that they needed at that time. Then when it came to the point where they had industrialized fairly successfully, they still couldn't catch up with the northern countries for a number of reasons. First, the northern countries were able to exploit the rest of the world, getting natural resources from the rest of the world at very low costs. And then that surplus then allows them to have much more investment in basic research, science, R&D, et cetera, so that they can increase their technological lead. So by the 70s, 80s, they're thinking, okay, we need to introduce some sort of modification to our top-down structure so that we can attempt to catch up in these other areas. The thing is, by 1990, basically when the USSR is collapsing, China basically has two choices. So you can either attempt to continue down the socialist road, have a state-driven command economy, or you can attempt to marketize. Now, what are the costs and benefits of these two paths? If you, by 1990, when the USSR is gone, if you want to go down the socialist road and say we're going to still be a top-down command economy, I think the most likely outcome of that would have been the global North countries led by the US saying, oh my God, look at this backwards anachronistic country. They are the enemy. They are the new evil empire. They are, persecuting Christians and killing babies and torturing puppies, whatever you guys need to think that they are super evil and to create them or to put them in the position the USSR had been in. And then we'll try to crush them however we can. So that means sanctions. That means fomenting breakaway regions. That means just causing whatever problems you can possibly cause to destroy them and impoverish them. And their propaganda campaign would probably have been very successful, just as successful as it was against the USSR. Other option, we'll open up. We'll say, okay, foreign capitalists, come in here, build factories, exploit the hell out of our workers, treat them like garbage. You'll love to come here, not just because wages are low. That's only one part, but you can get low wages all over the world. Why would you want to come to China? Because they had already industrialized using top-down command economy methods to the point where they had excellent infrastructure and the population was generally much better educated and trained in factory work than poor countries that didn't have that kind of socialist revolution, that kind of top-down industrialization. So that was basically the deal that they made. Come in, invest here, we'll get technology transfer that way, and we'll get the hard currency that we need to be able to buy the latest productive equipment, train our people, invest in R&D, et cetera, et cetera. So that's essentially what they did. And a lot of people in the Western left look at that and say, well, I don't like that. That's immoral. You're allowing your people to be exploited. And I agree on that point. I mean, I can't argue with the morality there. But my question to them then is, what is the better option that they had? So that was basically the option that they took. And I think the real kind of mask off moment when we can actually, legitimately make a judgment about the moral correctness or incorrectness of the Chinese government's policies will be when China develops to the point where they can no longer be crushed by cutting off inputs, economic inputs from the rest of the world. We already saw a Chinese company when they were cut off from semiconductor inputs was basically destroyed. So once they get to that stage where they can actually produce everything that they need to produce and they don't have to worry about sanctions destroying their country, their economy, then that'll be the point where it's like, okay, what is the true nature of the Chinese government? But until then, you have to realize the position that China and lots of other countries in the global south are in, how easily they can be crushed and how important it is to develop your economy to the point where you don't have to worry so much about the empire or the global north destroying you.
That's such a great breakdown, Peter. I want to pass it to Assal. And then we can get Karim thoughts and Josanna from there. But Assal, you got anything you want to add?
Well, I think I would just slightly simplify what Peter is basically saying, which is as long as we are an empire, we invite anybody else to be an empire. That's basically what it is, right? The problem with the rhetoric in the United States is that we're not mad that we're not mad about empire. We're mad about anybody trying to compete with us, period. That's the issue. The issue is not imperialism. The issue is not democracy. The issue is not human rights. We love those catchphrases, use them all the time, completely ignoring our own human rights abuses, drone attacking people as we pretend like we're ending wars, killing civilians. It's totally fine. We do these things every single day, the things we do to our own population. You can talk about imprisonment. You could talk about arms sales to war criminals. I mean, the list will go on and on and on to disprove that we care anything about any of the things that we say we care about. The issue is very simple. We don't want anybody competing with us. The problem with that is when you are an empire, you invite competition. That's essentially what Peter was explaining, right? You put other countries in a position when you have the power to exploit them, to suppress them, unless they fall in line, you force them to compete with you. Now, what's the alternative? This would be my own very simple explanation. We created the idea of internationalism as an alternative to empire. The problem was we never implemented it. We just used international bodies as tools of empire. That's why the US will boast of the United Nations when they want to go to war with Iraq, but then will veto anything that has to do with saying lifting an embargo on Cuba or human rights violations and apartheid in Israel. We just use them as other tools for our own empire. And the idea that, I may be a little bit of devil's advocate in this situation. I don't want to romanticize a state like China as if to say, here's this utopia that has been created in China. It's not. There's tons of criticisms, a laundry list. Something that's funny for me as someone who focuses on Iran is Iran is sometimes referred to as an imperialist power. What? Iran is an empire? Why? Now here's something interesting. They'll say something like, well, Iran has a presence in Iraq, with no sense of irony that that presence came in the wake of the US invasion of Iraq, right? There's no sense of irony about these things. There's no sense of irony when we have 800 bases around the world. Many of those bases surrounding Iran, right? Iran has no bases in Canada. Is that right? None, right? Does Iran have bases in Mexico? Central America? No. So the idea that these states are a threat to the US is not that they're actually a threat to the US. It's that they even entertain the idea of being independent of the US. So if you're independent of the US, if the US can't control you, you're a threat to its empire and its control, not to the United States' power. There is arguably no entity in human history that has had the power and reach of the United States in its current iteration. The United States, as of right now, has reached every single place in the world. And so when you compare this idea that these are competing empires, it's ludicrous. And the example that Peter gave was sanctions. What other country can sanction millions of people into poverty? None. No other country. I'll give you an example using Iran. When the United States under Trump quit the Iran nuclear deal, okay? Every other party was still in the agreement. But the US sanctions were so powerful that Europe could do nothing. Europe could not overcome US sanctions and secondary sanctions. That's the power of the US economy. That's the power of US empire. That no one can do anything once those sanctions are in place. So the idea of comparing them is probably what I find most problematic. And none of that is to say, and that's why I said at the beginning, none of that is to say that these states are not in and of themselves problematic. They are, but it's a joke to compare them in terms of power. They are not comparable powers. And our issue is not violations of sovereignty. Our issue is not human rights. Our issue is not democracy. Our issue is anything that can be independent of our reach and our power. And that's the threat that China poses. China poses an actual viable threat to being independent of the United States and its economy.
Yeah. So some very, very good points, Assal. I totally 100% agree with you. And I think, and you're right. Like, I don't think there's any government in the world that is that we can say, okay, this is Walhalla utopia. They're perfect. Every government has their serious issues of human rights abuses. But I think I would like to add, so not only is China a competitor to the United States, well, actually, I would like to broaden this idea. China is a competitor to US empire also in the sense that it's a competitor, it's an ideological competitor that threatens capital, and that threatens the hegemonic position of capitalists. What I'm trying to say is, and you see that's why the US has always been so afraid of socialist governments also in Latin America, is that once you see a government that elevates, whether it's indigenous people in Latin America or Afro-Brazilians in Latin America, or whether it's the poor in China, that elevates people out of poverty, this is very dangerous to that hegemonic position of the top 1%, because that creates a world where you actually elevate people who were previously the lower class to be exploited. Okay, that system really threatens the fundamentals of capitalism. I think this is a very important point. That is why you see that extreme obsession in the US and also other Western countries of like socialism and Marxism and leftism. Our mainstream media is just panicking when socialists get some form of power in our societies. And I think what Peter also said, a very, very important thing, is that China was very smart. The only way they could go up and in a way escape the boot of empire is by so-called opening up and creating this market economy. However, still maintaining that political power over its capitalists. So you have the Communist Party that rules over the capitalists in China, while in the United States you have the capitalists that rule over your political power. So that's reversed. Why is this so smart what China did? Because China opened up, especially during Deng Xiaoping. China even got praise from the West. Oh, China is becoming an open capitalist society. China was very smart because they were still controlling the capitalists. So China was growing while the empire was ignoring China in that sense. They were like, oh, yes, China is becoming one of us. In the meantime, the West was bombing the Middle East into oblivion, totally ignoring China. China was silently growing. And now they're at the point that they're so incredibly powerful that they become a serious contender of the United States. And they realize, wait a minute, they don't become capitalists like us, but it's too late. You could say it's kind of too late. You know what I mean? And and there was one comment I wanted to reply to. And I think that is something we leftists also should be very careful with, is that somebody said the only real socialist government is in Cuba. I think we cannot say that. I think we have so many different kind of iterations of socialism and leftism that there is not one perfect kind of socialism or leftism, not in Cuba, not in Bolivia, not in Brazil, not in China. I think we as socialists still have to find that socialist system that works for all of us. We're just not there yet. And I think we have to be really careful with this kind of purity discussions, like, oh no, that country is the real socialist country. That's like religious people would say, like, I'm following the real Quran, I'm a real Muslim, or I'm a real Christian. You know what I mean? I think we have to watch out with that kind of purity discussion. Leftists, we need to unite, and there are many different iterations of socialism. We will disagree with each other, but I don't believe that there's one real socialist country. You know what I mean? Maybe someone else wants to say something.
Yeah, well, so I'll pass
I
it to
wanted to say, sorry, thank you, Nick. I just wanted to say that, so I think I spoke about that here before already, but we had the BRICS, right, for a little while, which was Russia, China, with Brazil, Russia, China, South American and India. I'm with Assad. I think, like, whenever you have, like, I think the means of control, and of course, like, I truly believe that the Cold War now is between China and the US. But I also, like, think that those two separate poles are like playing us like a violin. Because China behaves like as a communist socialist country in the inside, and in the outside it's an imperialist capitalist country in the world economy. Reason why I say that is because, like, I always keep on, like, trying to compare. I don't understand properly the educational system in the US, but by my observations is it doesn't teach much of critical thinking unless you are in a specific path to it. Like, if you're studying something that goes towards it. And the reason why I'm bringing it up is that, like, I like to look at things, and, like, I think the danger that you just were talking about, Karim, is believing the need for a hero. We as human beings, unfortunately, have that. We created God. We created, like, all other heroes that we had, and now we are putting that up in, like, in governments and leaders of movements, and so I keep on looking at this story about the BRICS, and I haven't studied it and went, like, very deep on it, but I remember looking at it and saying, after it broke, because it's gone now. The BRICS is not a thing anymore. And I know that one of the ways that they used to break that block apart, was the coup d'etat that happened in Brazil. And it was in the same time where Brazil discovered pre-sal, which is an unlimited source of petroleum. And Brazil wanted to hold the royalties for the country, and coup d'etat. And then you start, like, breaking down the BRICS, and nowadays India, South Africa, and Brazil are in the economy is to break to pieces. Like we were destroyed without a war, without an invasion. And I don't see China and Russia, like if China was really like supporting and supportive and with this interest, I did not see much of a support. I did not see. I see China not supporting Bolsonaro. I see that the relations that we had with China are not the same anymore. But I did not feel the support, because like when Cuba was with the Soviet Union was helping Cuba to face the US, right? When the revolution happened, and Che and sorry, oh God, the president of Cuba, the leader of Cuba, Fidel, Che and Fidel took over, and then they worked with Soviet Union, and Soviet Union was like supporting. It was like, and I do not feel that from China. I really don't believe how you polarize. What?
Fidel did say that China is like the most important country for anti-imperialism in the world today, and this was like, I think 10 years ago or so. But yeah, I mean, I think actually even the USSR didn't really support revolutionary movements around the world as much as it could have. I think it was very conservative in its foreign policy overall. I think China is also relatively conservative when it comes to supporting revolutionary movements, but it does provide essential diplomatic support. Like even it's kind of actually, to me, it seems more similar to Brazil under Lula, like domestically very much like still, following what the kind of banking and capitalist class in Brazil want, but making life better for the poorest through the Bolsa Familia. China is doing something kind of similar. They're not bucking the interests of kind of global capitalists yet. We'll see some interesting news coming out of China this year. But internationally, they provide key diplomatic support, just like the Lula government did in its foreign policy. So I think there's a little similarity.
So I still have another story that I wanted to cover, but I had to end it here because we can go all day. This is why I'm flowing the idea of having this a weekly discussion, because I only plan on going like 90 minutes at best, but we went well over that because these conversations are so rich. Like I have a whole nother story we can discuss, but I'll probably save it to next Tuesday. Jackson was supposed to be on this episode, but he had a lot of actions he was doing in the Capitol. He was arrested yesterday, as Sabby was breaking down on her show earlier. But as far as I know, I think Jackson may be on here next Tuesday, Jackson Hinkle. I'm going to try to bring someone else on, Fred Hampton Leftists as well. I think Sabby Sabs. I might bring Finney if she's not able to make it. So I think we do it next Tuesday. I'm not 100% willing to commit to making this a weekly series, but I think we can do it again next week. If you guys are available. If not, that's fine. We can always book you guys next time. But I'm gonna cover the other story I say probably next week. I appreciate everyone for watching. Before we wrap up, I just wanted to toss it to you guys one more time, so you can just share where you guys where they can find you guys. So I'll start with Assal. Anything you want to plug or promote before you wrap up here?
Just you can follow me on Twitter at Assal Rad, ASSALRAD. And
make sure you guys subscribe to Bett Media. That's where Karim and Peter have a lot of their content on, and they're friend of the shows. Pretty much a solid rotation on this panel. Is there anything else that you guys want to plug or promote, Karim or Peter, before we log off?
Peter?
Not really. I'm not really good at modern media, so I'll leave the promotion to Karim. If you want, you can follow my like pseudonymous account on Facebook, Josephus Peter Franks. But I just like use that to post articles that I think are interesting. So I don't know, if you're interested, go for it.
Yeah. Make sure you guys follow Bett on Twitter, on Twitter and YouTube as well. But sorry, Karim, what was that?
Oh yeah, that's Bett.
No, I was just going to say
on Twitter.
Yeah, I was just going to say then follow BetBeat on Twitter, BetBeat on Twitter. Indeed, that's better, I would say, and of course our BetBeat Media channel on YouTube. And we hope to have to do some more interviews soon, also with Josanna. And hopefully Assal is willing to come back again. We're growing, so that's good stuff. And I agree. I think we should definitely make it regularly and trying to really build that international connection between us leftists. We're now having multiple continents already sitting here in the panel, which is lovely. I think Josanna said some really good points just now. I like you said, Nick, we could go on for hours, man. But I'll not react to it now. We can do it some other time. Thank you all for this opportunity.
Yeah, I'm missing Josanna because I know we talked about this before, but if you have any other South American activists that you want to bring on here for international, like any friends or anyone else that you will advocate for, bring them on. I would love to have more perspective from the global South in that region. But anything else you want to plug or promote, Josanna, before we wrap up here?
Just want to say it was Assal's fault because she put that seed of the critical thing in my head, and I'm like, yeah, she's right.
Yeah, okay.
I just want to say that, like, the reason why every time, I know Karim brought it up before, every time when I'm watching any show on the Fred Hampton's Leftist panel, the reason why I contribute with the super chat is because, like, I decided that my working class money is going to go to support what I believe, because I know it's a drop of water in the middle of the ocean, but I'm trying to fight the good fight. So contribute with these people as much as you can. Contribute with Peter and Karim's channel, and let's support each other, mutual aid in ways to, like, keep that alive and fight and find ways to educate ourselves as well. I'm very grateful to be here. I learned a lot. And I just wanted to say that every time a person in the US is fighting for the change, to bring on the change, you guys are fighting to bring change to the world. You are not fighting only for yourselves, you're fighting for the whole world, because we are where we are because of the big bully. So keep it up.
Yeah.
Well said.
Well said, guys. We will be back next week. Thank everyone for watching, and it was a great conversation as always. This is Social CMA. This is Nick signing off. Thank you guys for watching, guys.